Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Steven, this is Northwest Small Batch Brewing, and as the title suggests, I want to talk about my 5 tips for bottle bombs. I'm assuming everybody knows what this is. Basically, it's when you bottle a beer, like this one, and it's bottle conditioned, like this one, and you go to open it and it just, it can geyser out. Sometimes it just bubbles out. It's not too bad, but either way, it always happens with bottle conditioned beers. Some of them end up a little volatile. This is one of the last of my Graf beers. Here it goes. You see what I'm saying? Oh my gosh. Well, that, my friends, is serendipity. I could not have planned that better. Clearly, somebody wanted me to make this video. And it's just proof. So that Graf was, I can't even remember when I made it, but it's been sitting in the fridge a long time. By the way, Cityscape Brewing, if you're watching this, make sure you open the one I sent you over the sink. Just in case. Yeah, I mean, it's been sitting in the fridge for a long time. Well, I'm going to get to the problem with that in a second here. So let's get into it. Let's go over the 5 tips I have for bottle bombs. And by the way, there's no 100% guarantee, especially if you're bottle conditioning. There's just no 100% guarantee. So here's the first thing. Number 1, store it cool and dark. I'll tell you a little story. I do remember my mom telling me when I was younger that they used to, when she was a kid, her parents used to make homemade root beer. And they would, store it in glass bottles down in the basement. And in the middle of the night, you could often hear explosions going off, in the basement as the root beer bottles were overcarbonated and exploding. Yeah. So it happens. So that's number 1. Once you bottle your beer the way you want it, store it somewhere that's room temperature, 65, 70 Fahrenheit, and dark. Obviously you want to use dark bottles. Number 2, inspect your bottles. So keep in mind, if you bottle your beer and you're letting it, bottle conditioned beer can easily hit 30 plus PSI inside the bottle. So imagine that bottle actually exploding, not just opening it and having a geyser like I just had happen, but literally exploding, because that happens. Glass shards shooting out at that kind of pressure. It's dangerous. That's why we call them bottle bombs. So inspect your bottles. Anything with chips or that looks, like a manufacturing defect, anything like that, ditch the bottle. It's just not worth it. It is not worth it. They're like $1 a bottle. Just don't take the chance. Also, if you can find glass bottles that have thicker glass, that's helpful. In general, I think that the bottles you buy at homebrew stores are a little bit better condition than what you get. A lot of times the beers that you get from manufacturer, like let's say you get some macro beer and you save the bottle to use it. Those are recycled bottles, and a lot of times they can be weak. They have weak points in them, and so it's not that you can't use them. I'm just saying, if you're investing in something like that, think about that. Number 3, fermenting your beer fully. So I see a lot of times where people are like, I let my beer, sit in a bottle for a week and it's still flat, or they let it, they're complaining, right? Here's my rule of thumb when it comes to fermenting your beer in the bottle, like, bottle conditioning. 2 weeks is the minimum, right? Could it be carbonated enough to drink before that? It could be, but it probably won't be fully carbonated. So let's say you take a beer that you bottle conditioned, but you didn't let it sit at room temperature for minimum 2 weeks. And then you put it in the refrigerator, it's still fermenting. And by the way, that's probably what happened with the Graf I just opened, right? It was still fermenting probably, even though I waited that 2 weeks. I don't even know. I waited longer than that, but you know, yeast that's not dead yeast in there, right? So there could be some really slow, you know, conversion going on in there, even in the refrigerator, and over months and months it builds up, you know. So 2 weeks minimum. If you have a high gravity beer, you want longer than 2 weeks. You want to make sure you've really tried as much as you can to fully ferment it. Ingredients matter. Number 4, your ingredients, right? Older ingredients will take longer and slower to ferment. If you have old grain, old malt extract that you're using, it will take longer to ferment. So when you bottle it and you're trying to bottle condition it, it's going to take longer than you would think. Also your yeast, right? Yeast has a date on it. If you're using old yeast, even if you make a starter, you may end up having issues with the bottle conditioning. Old yeast will also either undercarbonate or just take longer to carbonate, which could result in a bottle bomb. You could always use like a different yeast for bottle conditioning if that were the case. You know, if you knew that you were making your beer with an older yeast. Number 5, and what I think is the most important one, is how much priming sugar, right? The big thing is don't measure it by volume. So if you're using sugar or whatever you're using, don't measure it by volume, because a tablespoon or whatever of sugar or whatever you're using can vary from person to person. It's just, yeah. I mean, it depending on whether you leveled it, how well you leveled it on the spoon. Doing it by volume is not good. Always do it by weight. So use your scale that you use for your hops to measure your priming sugar. Now, here's another problem. I'm a big fan, or I have been, guilty at least, of using these carbonation drops. These are Cooper's carbonation drops. It's just a drop, you know, if you haven't seen them, it's like a hard candy and you drop it into the bottle and you don't have to measure anything, right? Here's the problem. It says right on here, the dosage, sorry, I'm kind of hard to read. It says one drop per 375 milliliter bottle. So I'm guessing these were made for maybe European beer, because 375 milliliter, we don't have that size bottle here. I looked it up. A 12-ounce bottle is 300 and, well, I got on Google, says 355 milliliters. My measuring cup says, I think it said 400 milliliters. So let's just say 355 to 400, but I think Google's probably more correct. So 375 is less, right? Well, it's kind of in the middle. So 375 is not exactly a 12 ounce, right? It's sort of in between. So that's the other problem. These are not going to be super accurate because it's telling you a dosage that doesn't match the volume that we use. So use a priming calculator like online to decide how much sugar or whatever you want to use. Also, if you're curious, I measured, there are 3 grams of sugar in each one of these drops. So if you're using table sugar, 3 grams would equal 1 of these drops. So those are my tips to help avoid a bottle bomb. Of course, the ultimate way is to bottle off the keg. You're not going to have a bottle bomb if you do that, if you have like a beer gun or something. Anyway, I hope that helps. And I will be back in another week, as always, with another video. And until then, keep on brewing.